numbers that were provided by the developer were in the ballpark, and the projections provided by our economic advisor were in the ballpark. I'm concerned for various reasons, I won't go into all of them, but we projected a sale price of what I believe, or construction cost, which is much less than what actually is occurring. So I could be wrong because we don't know the sale price, but I do feel like we need to have, like, where did contingencies go? Where did, like, a better review of all the numbers.
Sure.
And that's all I've been asking.
I have a question. When we went into this, didn't Concord, our consult, didn't they do an analysis of all the bidding and stuff? Which is our consultant check pricing,
Right.
the
I mean, I think-
market. I mean,
right.
it was not just giving us numbers.
So I mean, the question is, do you want Concord to review these numbers, or do you feel, anyway, yeah, I mean, I think the CDA had some comfort level in backing off of that issue, because Concord had just done Lighthorse, they'd done another project, they had a sense of what was happening, and they got a pretty good track record in scrubbing. So, I mean,
The construction.
CDA wasn't going in blind, bottom line. Yeah, but
I mean, I think that the most accurate review of a projection of construction costs is what the actual construction costs ended up being.
no question.
I don't think substituting Concord, doing a review and saying, yeah, it looks good to us, is the same level of certainty as looking at what the actual numbers were. And that's what Trustee Rozak is suggesting.
Right, and I don't think anybody disputes that. I would say it was a little more than just flipping a coin saying it looks good.
No, I'm not saying
No,
that,
there's a
I'm
lot
not
of-
saying that, but I'm
Yeah.
saying there's certainty in reality. As long as we can all agree on the same reality, which we'll never attain.
I think that's what's at question here tonight, in fact, and I think this conversation that's culminating tonight is based on a lot of duplication of asking the same question over and over of our advisors. And so all the answers to the questions don't have any impact to the taxpayer except the increased costs of asking the questions over and over to our advisors that we get billed for, that
I have
then
gotten
is
answers.
from the taxpayer. So, and I also, what I hear is kind of a setup to check math. And as a board, I'm not comfortable with one of us proposing that they check the math. That's why we contract with advisors who have integrity in the field. I love listening to Bruce Block. I learn something new every time. You can come every week. However,
I don't do that very often. Just so you know.
However, we have contracted these people as a board to serve all of us. And so for one of us to step forward and say that we would like to sort of review the construction costs. You know what? When you pose it that way, it makes my challenge to you seem unreasonable, and it's not. So your challenges are not unreasonable, mine are not unreasonable, but we act as a board, and we contract with people as a board. So I would just like to caution, moving forward, that I really appreciate everybody's efforts to ask questions and to encourage us to get the best deals for the village. However, on this case, it really sounds like the end game is to try to find something to, it sounds like you're looking for something. It sounds like it's not uncovering anything that we wouldn't try to negotiate in the future. And I'll leave it at that.
If I could just make a comment about the Eller's IRR analysis. When I read the development agreement, that analysis is crucial to the but-for argument. It's crucial to the whole economic underpinning of the grant and of this of the development agreement, which is that there was a real economic reality that the developer, there was some gap there, that the developer could not go ahead without public participation in the project. And how did we know that? We hired Ellers to look at his pro forma and to do an analysis in IRR and say, yes, we're looking at it and we're confirming for you that he is not going to make, the general capital is not going to make a egregious amount of profit that would would undercut the argument for public participation in the project in the first place. Okay, so that was really what the village, now trustees Rozak, myself, and Zovik were not on board at that time. But at that time, that's what the village relied on to say that this was a valid and a reasonable thing to do in terms of the TIF and tax money. So Eller's analysis was crucial. The cap rate that they chose to use was crucial. And that's why the actual sales price, you know, which relates back to the actual real cap rate, is a really important question. So it's not just like going back and checking their math or trying to play gotcha with Ellers. To me, it gets to the crux and the heart of the economic argument behind the development agreement and behind the public subsidy to that project. So I just wanted to say that. But I did also want to ask, on December 19th, and I believe you were here at the December 19th meeting also, and we received some materials, including some of the economic considerations that said General Capital did not disclose the sale price of the property at this time. However, this information will be available to our assessor upon closing of the sales transaction. I know you didn't write this, Bruce. I believe it was under the chair of the CDA, Peter Hammond's signature. I would like to ask our village manager, who I believe is the executive director also of the CDA, did you write this or did Pete write this? Who was responsible for this page, economic consideration?
We all
Okay.
work together.
Where did you get that information that
Because usually after a sale, it's transacted, and we find the sale price.
Did General
And-
Capital tell you?
No. And then Bruce, in his work, and he provided to you tonight, that it is not available. I thought it was going to be available just like any other sale.
Okay,
But
because
we
I
knew what
think
type of
it's,
sale it was.
Excuse me?
We knew what type of sale it was. You were talking about it was
Oh, yeah,
not
we knew it was an
sale.
asset sale,
And
right.
so I just didn't realize that not an asset, but an entity sale. I just wouldn't have been familiar with that. But meant you weren't going to find out
Right.
the owners or the sale price. And we should have, I feel like we should have been informed of that because
we could have
talked
put it in
about
the
that.
development agreement, in the amendment to the development agreement, that we wanted this piece of information, which, as I just explained, is crucial to the whole concept of the grant. So I'm a little disturbed that we were given information on December 19th prior to approving an amendment to the agreement, and now we find out, oh, that's not really the case. I know it's not you.
I actually don't think all of the memos that we've received on this topic have explained that the INR, or whatever, the is a moot point, because based on the projections that were available at that time, it was calculated. You can't go back and say that something shouldn't have happened when you didn't have those numbers.
Can I just say one thing? That I couldn't
I don't think
disagree more.
she's finished yet.
So again, I feel that that's a false premise that you just made that argument on.
Well, the point is, what David is saying is that, as I understand it, is that Mr. Harrigan should have known that the IRR, that the program would have bought that, and that the IRR went down to 5 or 6. He used 7.5, and he shouldn't have used it. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
that's a complete misstatement
Okay, well, I just-
of what I was saying in
Good.
an attempt to ridicule me,
No.
which I don't appreciate.
No,
Okay, what I'm saying is that the development agreement and the board would not, the whole concept of giving a redevelopment grant is that there's an economic necessity, the but-for test. The project would not have, it's such a marginal project for the developer that unless he has the additional participation of the public money, that the project just wouldn't happen. Now, we don't even know how, now we know that the developer offered for sale the Metro Market and the parking structure of $42 million, okay, which is substantially more than what was in the Ellers numbers as to the value in 2017, okay, which was what, 27 or something? Okay, So the point is, let's say he got $42 million, which after, and I just used Eller's numbers, after his costs, he would have sale proceeds of $25 million. It's kind of hard to say that this was such a marginal project when a year and a half later, he walks away with profits on $7 million in equity of $25 million. I mean, we're talking an experienced developer. This is not his first time in the rodeo here. He knows this market and he's done a number of deals, okay? So I have a hard time believing, of course, now we can't even say what he actually walked away with, but this all goes to, was there really a but-for, was there really an economic necessity for this grant? And that, I think, is the essential question that we're asking. That's number one. And number two, okay, I would just like to suggest that we ask the assessor to move up, to not wait until later in the year to make the assessment of this property, that we move up the assessment. I would also like to move, I'll make a formal motion to suggest that the assessor hire an assessor, a consultant with a specialty in commercial property, and these kinds of deals and dealing with this kind of asset transfer, and that we that we move up the assessment and have a report from the assessor. At least we will have their opinion of the value of the property.
We're not agended for
Are we not agended for discussion of this and no
that. We have
action?
motion
The presentation.
to discussion.
Well, I propose that that next meeting we agendize this and ask for an expedited assessment with a specialty assessor who understands this type of deal type of property.
I'll second that. So, again, I just want to state that there's no malice behind my request. If you have worked in government for many, many years, you realize as an elected official, if you don't get the information, even the look-back information, and something had gone wrong in that deal, you are going to lose your job, and you might even go to jail. I mean, your job is to ask the questions and to review financial transactions. And so I wasn't there for the beginning, but I certainly am here for the end, and I feel like I'm exercising my responsibility. Now, you might not agree with that, but I'm not looking to gotcha. I'm looking to exercise what I believe is my responsibility for financial oversight of management and our consultants. And so I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I just wanted to state my intention.
There's been a number of times that people have indicated questions weren't asked or somehow we sat around. I know I participated probably for 3 years intensely on listening and reviewing and asking questions on how is this thing put together and what's in the best interest of the village. This deal was much more risky. It's easy to look back and say, oh, it turned out great and it's wonderful. We're getting the money early. We're getting 3 to 4 years of increment, which is probably maybe close to the clawback, but there is substantial coming to the village. They went through the process. We have experts. Bruce Block is one of the premier real estate, knows a lot. Ellers is the leading financial analyst in the state. They were advising us, and we got done what the village wanted done. We have 3 blocks, a substandard grocery store, a vacant Walgreens, a vacant bookstore, about 1.5 blocks of parking lots. We now have this modern grocery store, 50 public parking spots, plus plenty of other parking, and a large multi-use apartment building. And we've got an increment coming. So the outcome for the village is we've achieved what we needed to achieve. We now have a solid renter in the grocery store. We could be looking at a vacant building. If Roundy's hadn't been bought, it could be a whole different story. It's nice we can sit here and argue over, well, we should be getting more. There's something we can argue over. We could be arguing over what are we going to do? That's why the developer took on that extra risk, and part of the clawback is He assumed some of the risk. I know, I remember reading the newspaper articles. Roundy's was not doing that well. It could have gone, so I think there's the risk. It's easy to sit here and argue over, wow, it's all turned out well, but what if it hadn't turned out well?
I
Or
still
a
want to
deal
review
had,
the numbers if
right.
it didn't turn out well. I mean, I would want to, I think my point was, I want to review the numbers no matter how the deal turned out. I feel like that's my obligation as an elected official. So people may differ in that opinion, but that's why I'm asking the question.
But you're saying nobody looked at it.
No, I didn't say that. The
No,
projections were
you
well
did.
scrutinized.
That has been said, and I also think that the main difference is that, my opinion is that you're asserting yourself. I appreciate exercising what you think, because we all have to live with the decisions we make. But we also are part of the board too. And so I think the difference between our opinions is that I put a lot of trust in everybody in this room and everybody who has come before to bring us to this place. And so I exercise my obligation a little differently. And I just want to put that out because the method that you're using has cost money to the taxpayer that otherwise would not